The Houston Texans hit the field for OTAs, and I was focused on the offensive line, the revamped, retooled, reshaped, whatever you want to say, offensive line. One of the biggest problems of the Texans in 2024, the big question mark in 2025, how did they look as that journey to find the best five begins for the Houston Texans? We'll break down the interior guys, the tackles, as well as the center. But DeMeco Ryans noted that in these practices, a lot of fundamentals, a lot of back to basics for the offensive linemen. They're not in full pads. You don't do a ton of contact with the defensive line. So a lot of hand placement, a lot of between the ears work. And as DeMeco Ryans hammered home, making sure that pad level stays low. This is a bigger offensive line than it has felt in previous years. Just a bigger group of offensive linemen. So you're going to have that low pad level. Low man wins, right? You always hear that from offensive line coaches. And Cole Popovich, the offensive line coach for the Texans, was coaching his crew up a ton when there wasn't stuff for the offensive linemen to do in team drills or with other portions of the team. They were over on the sideline. A lot of bag work, a lot of firing off the ball, plenty of work for this offensive line, and they've got a long way to go to figure some things out. So who got the first crack at the offensive line? Well, that initial offensive line that went out there, about what we'd been expecting with a surprise here or there. Left tackle was Cam Robinson. Left guard was Laken Tomlinson. So the two free agent acquisitions on the offensive line, they're getting first crack on the left side. At right tackle, the incumbent right tackle from last season, Blake Fisher. Then the two surprises on the offensive line. Titus Howard at right guard, which we'll talk about that in a moment, and Jake Andrews at center. Yeah, Jake Andrews at center. That was your first offensive line out there on the field, with a couple of rotations throughout practice on that line as Jared Patterson got an opportunity in Andrew's spot, and Ariante Ursery got an opportunity in Blake Fisher's spot. Amongst some of the alignments and conglomerations of the offensive line after that first-team offensive line, Ariante Ursery at left tackle with Austin Deculus at right tackle, Juice Scruggs at left guard, Jarrett Patterson at center, and Jalen Thomas at right guard, a name that you probably haven't heard of or thought about much when it comes to the offensive line. And then there again, DeMeco Ryans stressed there'd be mixing and matching amongst this offensive line. So you had some mixing and matching things with the second-team offensive line, third-team offensive line. Again, nobody's won a starting job as OTAs hits the field for one of the very first times. Nobody's a starter yet, but this is where the journey begins. And if I had to guess what the first-team offensive line or the first offensive line was going to look like, it would have looked like what the Texans put out there. Because let's talk about the guard situation. Then we'll talk about center and ultimately the tackles. The guard situation is an intriguing one because both guards played really poorly last year for the Texans. Kenyon Green at left guard, Shaq Mason at right guard. Neither of those players are still here. Scruggs, when he filled in, was okay. Titus Howard was okay at left guard, but it makes sense that Laken Tomlinson is the initial left guard for this team. He's played so much football at left guard that him learning a new position doesn't make as much sense as putting someone like Titus Howard in a new position. Now, Howard has played guard before, but it's been left guard when he's not at tackle. He has 3 snaps at right guard in his career, according to Pro Football Focus. And I can't even remember why he was there for those 3 snaps at right guard way back in the day. So a new spot on the offensive line for Titus Howard over at right guard. But if you're looking for beef, if you're looking for experience and really the investment that they have in Titus Howard, it makes sense he's going to get a crack at an offensive line spot and a chance to start. And Howard, for all the conversations we've had about him, looks like he has been in the weight room this offseason. Trimmed up in the midsection, looked a little bit more muscular in the upper body. And if he knew heading into the offseason he was primarily going to be a guard, maybe that changed the way that he approached things. But Titus Howard, he looks pretty strong, and he looks like he's trimmed up and lost a little bit of the weight that he was carrying when I'm sure he thought he was initially going to play tackle for most of last season and then had to bump inside. But a new position for Titus Howard, Laken Tomlinson, the left guard, Titus Howard, the right guard. Couple of other notes there about the guards. Juice Scruggs at guard. Now, remember last year, Nick Caserio talked about how Scruggs was better as a center than as a guard. I wonder if now Scruggs is going to be a guard for this team. And Jalen Thomas, an intriguing name there at the right guard spot. I thought perhaps we would have seen the offseason darling Ladarius Henderson in there at right guard, but saw him at left guard with some other groupings and, again, conglomerations of the offensive line. So they've got options, but if they could wave a magic wand and just have two guys take care of that guard spot, it feels like Tomlinson and Titus Howard will get that opportunity initially. But again, it is May. It is OTAs. Nobody has won a starting spot yet. Speaking of starting spots, first guy out at the center position, Jake Andrews, a big surprise at center. Now, why is Jake Andrews such a surprise? Well, because Jake Andrews has played 71 snaps in the NFL in 2 seasons. He was injured all of last year for the New England Patriots. The Texans claimed him off of waivers, and even in college, Andrews primarily played guard. He's played 70 or so snaps at guard in the NFL, and in college was primarily a guard until his final year in college at Troy. Who was his offensive line coach? I'll give you 2 guesses, and the first one doesn't count. Yeah, Jake Andrews' final year in college, his offensive line coach is the current offensive line coach for the Houston Texans, Cole Popovich. And what did Jake Andrews play at offensive line, along the offensive line, his final year at Troy? He played center, almost 1,000 snaps at center for the Trojans in his final year in college with Cole Popovich as his coach. So you could put the pieces together. Hey, Andrews played under Popovich at Troy, former New England Patriot that they claim off of waivers. Obviously, Popovich is a guy that knows Andrews, and he got the initial crack there at the center position. Something to try to figure out here in the coming months about center, and I believe the Texans are going to keep this close to the vest here, is what exactly are the duties of the center position, because in Bobby Slowick's offense, there was a lot more put on the center, a more cerebral ask from the center position. I wonder if maybe that duty for blocking assignments, schemes, who to block, how to adjust things gets put back on CJ Stroud's plate. And maybe with the center spot, you just put the guy out there that's going to give them the best chance to get the other team blocked. And maybe you don't have to worry as much about the between the ears, and you can worry about that guy being able to open up some blocking lanes, or opening up some running lanes, for the running backs, and then getting guys blocked in clear passing situations as well. But Andrews, I frequently mess up and call him James Andrews, which is the Tommy John surgery doctor guy. But Jake Andrews, a name to watch here as OTAs and ultimately when training camp gets here in July, a name to pay attention to when it comes to the offensive line. Jarrett Patterson right behind him, some opportunity there for Patterson. Be interesting to see if Scruggs gets back in the center mix. Didn't see him at center in this practice. Rookie undrafted free agent Eli Cox played a little bit of center as well. You don't have to keep 3 centers if you wanted to. You could have Patterson also be a backup at a guard spot, also be a backup at center. Cox maybe just a true center as a backup. Maybe you could stash Cox on the practice squad, but that's all a conversation for much further down the road. So we talked about guard, talked about center. Let's talk about the tackles, the edges. And the edges weren't a huge problem last year, though they contributed to some of the issues there for the Houston Texans. Cam Robinson getting Laramie Tunsil's spot initially for the Texans out there at left tackle. Even at one point, I saw Ariante Ursary try to come in for a drill or a snap or a moment. Cam Robinson sort of waved him away. But Robinson getting first crack, and for what it's worth, again, it's not in pads. It's not anywhere near full speed. Robinson looked like he held his own there at left tackle in the practice against a couple of different defensive line lineups that the Texans put out there. And then over at right tackle, Blake Fisher. Now, this to me was the first, whoa, that guy looks different of the offseason workouts. When I saw Fisher, it looks like he's trimmed up quite a bit there in the midsection, but still has the bulk in the upper body. And when you think about what the book was on Blake Fisher coming out of Notre Dame, the thought from a lot of draft nicks were he's going to need a year of seasoning and he's going to need a year in an NFL strength and conditioning program. And it feels like Fisher got some seasoning last year, trial by fire. He didn't play really well last year at right tackle, but it's clear that he has transformed his body a little bit, maybe turned some of that weight into muscle and slimmed up his core, hopefully strengthened it as well. And then Fisher out there at right tackle after a year of seasoning and a year in an NFL strength and conditioning program, maybe you start to see a higher floor for Fisher, and he can go about trying to unlock his true potential at right tackle as well. Now, he's probably going to have to fend off Ariante Ursery, a second-round pick from this year's draft. Of course, Fisher was a second-round pick at offensive tackle from last year's draft. So Ursery got an opportunity in Fisher's spot with Cam Robinson, Titus Howard, Laken Tomlinson, and Jake Andrews on the offensive line. And then Fisher took some of Ursery's opportunities with some of the other offensive linemen. So does feel like Ursery's going to get a crack at both tackle spots, work at both tackle spots as he tries to find what is most comfortable. And it would make sense that if he doesn't supplant Robinson at left tackle, he doesn't beat out Fisher at right tackle, that Ursery is your swing tackle for the upcoming season. But thought it was interesting that he filled in for Fisher, not for Robinson, when it came to the initial offensive line that you saw out there on the field. But Fisher, the body transformation for him, that to me was what stood out the most as far as looking at the offensive lineman. And Ursery, when he got in there, left tackle, a couple opportunities. Second year, defensive end Solomon Byrd, he got Ursery a couple of different times with some speed, just was able to work around him. Now, again, it's not full speed with the offensive line. They're not in pads. They're not fully padded up here. And so, as D'Amico Ryans talked about after practice, there's a little give and take. But as far as just getting out there, getting in front of the guy, looked like Byrd won a couple of reps against Ursery. But when Ursery does get his big paws, and look, he's every bit 6'6", over 330. He is a mountain of a man. When he gets his big paws on somebody, it's pretty clear to see that that defender is not going anywhere. Now, it was Solomon Byrd and some of the depth guys on the defensive line, but Will Anderson did give a lot of praise to Ursery for his athleticism, his ability to bend as a big player, and that is something that Ursery is going to need to showcase on a consistent basis if he wants to upend one of his teammates there on the offensive line and find himself with some opportunities to play instead of Blake Fisher or instead of Cam Robinson, because as we know, he's going to be a tackle this season, no guard for Ariante Ursery. Those are my offensive line observations from the first OTA. It'll be a heavily viewed, a heavily watched position over the course of OTAs, minicamp, certainly training camp when it gets here. You get everybody in there, and you get the Danielle Hunter versus Blake Fisher, the Will Anderson versus Ariante Ursery on a consistent basis. It'll be something to watch, but just kind of starting the race to find the best five on this offensive line here with OTAs, and that's what I observed. If you've got any questions about the offensive line, drop them in the comment section down below. Do my best to answer them on your way down there. Throw me a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hey, you know who would love the perfect gene? Offensive lineman. The perfect gene, it's not just built for big guys, but I found it as a big guy that has a hard time finding genes. The perfect gene is the way to go to find you breathable, stretchable, and the most comfortable jeans you will ever have. I love them. I got 2 pair. I'm about to get me a 3rd pair here, and they have tons of different styles, tons of different colors as well. And with my link in the description down below, you're going to get 15% off your first order. You're going to get free shipping and try out a bunch of different styles and colors because you get free exchanges as well. 15% off, free shipping and free exchanges. Try out the different styles and different colors that the perfect jean has for you. And when you try them on, you'll realize they're perfect for you, just like they were perfect for me, my friends at the Perfect Jean. Appreciate you watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.